All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first Inclusion and Wellbeing Forum for the new academic year 2024-25. My name is Dr. Catherine O'Farrell. I'm one of the founders of Inclusion. We're joined by Harmeet Dillon, who's my partner and co-founder for Incluzun.com. And we support schools and organizations on their inclusion journey. We provide learning support assistance for schools. So if you need any shadow teachers, just let us know. We can help, we can work with your families, and we provide some consultancy for schools as well. Today's session will be recorded. We will share clips of the session on our YouTube channel. If you check the chat, we've added all of our channels there, so you can follow us and keep up to date with literally daily updates around inclusion. We would ask that all mics remain muted unless you have a question or a comment, then please raise your hand or pop it into the chat. And Harmeet and I will be monitoring the chat throughout. If you have any comments or questions, please do not mention specific schools and do not mention specific families or students. Be mindful that we're on a public forum and we're not here to discuss individual cases, rather strategies and procedures for generalized processes for schools. While we do offer advice and guidance for schools, we always recommend that you would speak to your SLT and your school leadership before you take any action in your school to make sure that whatever you're doing is in line with your particular school's policies. Industry experts are welcome to listen, but we are not advertising on the forum. If you would like to collaborate with us in any way, pop us a DM or an email privately. We are all in the same role together, essentially. We've all been inclusion leads, we've all been Senkos. So we are here to make suggestions or advice, but nobody knows best for your setting except you and your team. So please be mindful that we're all in this together. Today, we are joined by two absolutely wonderful practitioners, and we're really lucky to have them. We have Philip Thompson, who is the Director of People of Determination for Abu Dhabi, which is the regulatory body in Abu Dhabi. And we're joined by Amy Perry, the Head of Inclusion for Repton here in Dubai. So from each of these practitioners, we're going to get a little insight into the procedures for each of these two key emirates. If you're a Head of Inclusion or Senko and you're joining, particularly new joiners, this should be very useful for you because we hope to give you some advice and guidance as to what you need to do at the start of the year. Both Harmeet and I have been Senkos in the UAE, and I think both of us were thrown into our jobs with very little guidance or support. So we had wished that there was something like this happening when we first took our roles. Would you agree, Meeta?
Oh, definitely, for sure. But it was an interesting journey, and I think from the time when we joined to now, it has definitely evolved, and it's evolved positively. There is so much more happening now, so much more to see, so much more support, and just so much of everything. But no matter how much there is out there, please don't be afraid to reach out and ask for more support whenever you need it. The worst somebody can say to you is, I'm sorry, I can't help you, or no, I just don't have time. If that is the case, but at least you know you've tried, reach out to everybody else, somebody else, reach out to us. We can definitely try to connect you to somebody.
Step back.
Because,
oh, sorry, Meeta, I think we lost you.
Oh, right, okay, I think so. I think my internet's being more dodgier than yours is.
That's dodgy.
Yep. But just what I'm saying is just collaborate. That's the biggest word ever. And reach out to us. We'll help as much as we can. And I'm sure many of you can vouch for that.
Yeah. Okay, before we move into the content of the session, I just wanted to give a little reminder and a step back. At this time of year, in the inclusion teams in schools and organizations, we're so busy getting everyone uploaded onto different portals, organizing support, that we sometimes forget the real reasons and purpose what we do.
Great. Now, I will try and do this justice. And if Ryan, my colleague from the SOD office at ADEK, is watching this, I apologize if I mess up your presentation, but this is not my work, this is hers, and she spent a lot of time to sort this out. But I'll talk you through, this is the Abu Dhabi Department of Education and Knowledge, ESIS, and it's an Electronic Student Information System is what ESIS stands for. We've launched a new module for schools, and it's called the Additional Learning Needs module. Now, I asked Rayanne before this, and she said it normally takes about an hour. So I will do my best to skim through this as quickly as I possibly can, and then leave you some time for questions and things like that. But, you know, if Rayanne, you are there, I apologize now for messing this up. So first thing, what do we need to do? We need to log into the ESIS system. So this is the address. If you have issues with logging into the ADEK system, you have to contact the ADEK systems team. Now, I will say that if you are a head of inclusion in the ADEK PASS system, and if you work in Abu Dhabi, you'll know about the PASS system, then you should automatically be able to log in to ESIS and have access to this system. If not, no point emailing me. Do email the systems team, and they will be able to assist you with logging into the system itself. Make sure what I will stress is when you first log in, use your PASS email address and password, and make sure that when you log in, you select the correct role. So where it's highlighted there, it's a special educational needs specialist. That gives you access to amend and update the ESIS ALN system. You have to make sure you select special educational needs specialist role, otherwise you won't see it. Now, I said at the start, I will try and go through this quickly. We do have user guides for the ESIS system. This is the web address here. You don't need to log in or have access to ESIS. There's no login required for this, and it will give you access to the ESIS user guide. In the user guide, under student demographics here, editing student demographics, there's a section called additional learning needs, and it will talk you through signing into ESIS, choosing demographics, and the process that I'm going to explain to you right now. Now, when you first log into ESIS, you will see this screen on the left-hand side, which is the student's screen. If you click demographics, you should then be able to put in the student's ESIS ID or student ID or just a student name. You can then search on the right-hand side, and then the student's details will appear here. If you then click on this student, you should then get to the page that says student demographics, this student here, and then that will give you a list of all of the students with that name linked to that student demographic that is in your school. You can then view the selection at the bottom here. So you click the link on the student, view selection, and you should get this page, which is the student's basic information page. And it says things like their ESIS number, their current school, and then basic information like the student's name, address, contact details, family information, things like that. Now, if you look at the 5th tab across, you should have additional learning needs, which is our new module within ESIS. You click the additional learning needs section, and these boxes will appear. Now, I will tell you, in my advice, start at the top and work downwards. Don't skip any of the sections, because the ones that have got the asterisks next to the description, they are mandatory things you need to include.
سلم ايديك يا روحي انت. يلا باي.
Sorry, was that for me? I didn't hear what that was. Did someone have a question?
No, I muted them. Sorry, it was just a
Yeah,
mistake.
yeah.
Carry on.
I think somebody wasn't on mute. Please, can you check that you're on mute?
Okay, I shall continue. So once you get to the additional learning needs section, make sure anything next to it that has an asterisk next to the title is required. So, for example, diagnosed by a licensed specialist, and you'll see from the drop-down boxes that's yes or no. Now, if they have a diagnostic report from a psychologist, psychotherapist, It's a simple yes, date the diagnosis was given, the name of the specialist, and then also, do they receive any additional learning needs services? Now, that is services that the child needs that supports them with their ALN. Now, I'm going to throw this out there and say, if you say no to this question, then my response to you would be, why are you including them in the ALN system? And then also there's a section here that says identified by the school. So you will have students that will enroll in your schools that do not have a psychological report, but you've identified that they have some form of barrier to learning or additional learning need. You can specify, yes, it was identified by the school and the date of identification. Okay, now what I will say is, for example, where you say identified or diagnosed by a specialist and you say yes, there will be further down in the system a separate section that appears that says add the clinical report, and that will have an asterisk next to it. So that is a mandatory thing. So if you're trying to update a child's additional learning needs record, make sure you have access to clinical reports and things like that, because the system will not allow you to continue without saving those things. Okay. Now, the next section, primary area of need, where we actually ask you to identify what's the area of need of that student. Now, we are using the Abu Dhabi Disability Classification, which is the unified framework for the UAE. So if you're familiar with working in a Ministry of Education school or an ADEK school, you will know this classification. And basically, there are 5 sections to this. So neurodevelopment, sensory disabilities, physical disabilities, psychological disorders, and multiple disabilities. And then we ask you under that classification framework to identify which category and then subcategory. And it's all described in the Abu Dhabi classification guide. So the information is there. Now, let's say they have a secondary area of need. We also ask you to include that as well, if they have one. If they don't have one, you'll notice it's not got an asterisk next to it. You're not required to include it. Now, one thing we have done with primary area of need is we've included a 6th category for our schools, because some people will be sat in this meeting now and they will say, what happens if we say it's additional learning needs, it's identified by the school as a yes, we don't have a specialist report, I'm not prepared to put in there that this child has a neurodevelopmental or a sensory or whatever, or, you know, whatever need you wish to say that the child might have. Because you will say, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not licensed, and I'm not allowed to diagnose children. And absolutely, we do not want people to be diagnosing children. There is a federally approved process and a licensed clinician process for this. So what we have done in primary area of need is added number 6, which is undiagnosed or undetermined. So you may say that Phil, for example, has a primary area of need that is undetermined or undiagnosed, because you are just not sure, they've not had a clinical report, but you are providing them with support and you want to include them in the ALN section. Okay, so we've kind of introduced that to protect you and protect us and make it easier for us to have conversations with parents about your child may have barriers to learning or additional learning needs, etc. Okay, and I've just highlighted that there. So primary area of need, you may have some that are undiagnosed and undetermined, and that is okay. And then the category next to that, instead of it saying autism, this is because we picked neurodevelopmental, and autism is neurodevelopmental disorder. It will say undiagnosed, undetermined here, and then category will be undiagnosed, undetermined, and that is it. There'll be nothing else. Okay. So secondary area of need, as I say, if you wish to add one, you can add one. If not, you don't need to. And there's the copy of the classification framework there. I've included it in the slides if people wish to have a look at that. But again, you can just Google this. It's available, Abu Dhabi Disability Classification Guide. And you can have a look through that if you wish in your own time. Now, the next part of the data that we ask is about current education provision. So we are, in our policy, we are pushing a tiered or graduated model of support and intervention. Many of you will be familiar with that. And what we are saying is identify where on your graduated approach this child may be. Now, you may say that they are tier 1, it's universal, and actually all they require is some slight adaptation to classroom teaching or slight curriculum adaptation. And again, identify what that is, what the area of intervention is. Now, it could be other, because maybe it's just teaching or something, or maybe they're doing like a life skills or vocational program. You can actually include those things here. Okay, and then also the next part is any additional fees that you might be charging, also include that. So in Abu Dhabi, you are allowed to charge up to 50% of your tuition fee as an additional cost for parents to pay towards meeting the needs of students of determination. And you don't require ADEK's approval for that. It's within the policy and you are allowed to do that. Now, what I would say is if you are charging parents from a compliance perspective, you will need a signed agreement from the parent that says they agree to pay the additional fee, how much they will pay and what it's for. And then we ask you further on in the ALM module to upload the signed parent agreement and tell us how much you are actually going to be charging that parent and that the parent agrees. Okay, now if it's over 50% of your tuition fee in the inclusion policy, you are allowed to charge more. However, you have to have ADEK's approval and signed consent from the parents for their approval as well. But ADEK SOD service has to agree and approve anything over the 50%. Okay, so that is what the current education provision section looks like once it's started to be populated. And we also ask, can you identify whether that child has or needs an individual assistant? And then again, as I say, if you've added a clinical assessment report, the attachment section will appear and say upload the clinical report. And for annual fees, this is the area for the signed parent agreement. Okay. Also, if you tick that they have a documented learning plan, that will appear and you will be asked to upload the documented learning plan. Okay. Other sections within the system, very, very straightforward. Education placement, what's their current level of academic performance? When did individual interventions start? What's the name of the inclusion teacher? Now, you'll be looking at some of this and you may say, for example, they're just in a regular class. So say that. If they're in a special educational class or a resource-based provision, just identify that in the system. We want to try and understand the challenges that schools are facing from an ADEK perspective. So if you are running a resource-based provision or special educational classes, or a child is just accessing a regular classroom, then do let us know, because we are keen to understand how many of our schools, for example, offer a resource-based classroom or a blended approach of a regular classroom, a resource base, or maybe it's just a special educational class, as you would call it, and what types of accommodation that child might be receiving. So, for example, have they got a speech therapist, occupational therapist, etc. Okay, so we ask you to add these things into the system here. Now, one of the questions we normally get back is current level of academic performance. Now, it isn't a starred section, so you don't necessarily have to populate that. But what we're asking is, for example, if you have a child that is grade 10, but you know they are accessing curriculum work at grade 6, the current level of academic performance for that child is grade 6. So we want you to put in here, the child is currently at grade 6. The reason why we ask for some of these things and this information is because it helps us as ADEK make decisions for these students. So, for example, some of you may have, for example, asked if a child can be exempt from map testing or something like that, right? Or move from Arabic A to Arabic B. And we will say, okay, we will check the system and we will look at the ALN return for your school. We will find that student's details. We will review their psychological report that you've included. We will review their IEP. We will check their current level of academic performance. We will check what accommodations they are receiving and if they're receiving any in-school therapy and things like that, right? So we will check all of these things, and that will help ADEK in terms of making decisions on whether children should be exempt from different things, like moving from Arabic A to Arabic B, or MAP testing, for example. So the more information you can give us, I suppose the better it is for you, but also the better it is for the students, because we'll all make the right decisions. Okay. And then the last section is termly review. So we ask in our policy that each student has, if they have an IEP, if they are tier 2 or tier 3 in your tiered model of support, all tier 2 and tier 3 students are required to have a documented learning plan. Maybe it's an IEP, maybe it's a behavior plan. And we ask you to include that in this section as well. Okay, I'm going to skip through this bit. Once you actually add in, so let's say it's review term 1, do they have a documented learning plan? What's the date of that plan? And then we ask about progress tracker. So maybe the student just started because it's term 1, and actually you can't comment on their progress from their target setting from the year before, maybe something like that, right? Now, what we do ask is for you to determine whether the child is making progress. Now, this has caused some issues with our schools as well, because not all of our schools can demonstrate or identify whether students make enough good progress all the time. So we're asking you to identify from the targets. Let's say you set a child 6 targets throughout the year, and maybe they've achieved 3 of those targets, and actually they're achieved and that's done. Maybe 3 of them they haven't achieved. So actually, is that they've achieved 50% of the targets? Yes. So we would expect you to say 50% of the time, this child's achieving their targets. And we ask you to report on that in the system as well, because we want to start tracking the progress of students of determination. So we're trying to identify through this system whether students, actually have any barriers to learning. What is it that schools are having to manage on a daily basis? What are the needs of the children through the areas of need that schools have got? And then also, how are we tracking and managing progress for those students? And equally, are parents being charged and having to pay for services? If so, what are those services? Because this will inform ADEK's approach in terms of strategy and policy, in terms of how and what schools need in terms of their support and moving forward. Okay. Okay, I've talked a little bit about that. And then also what you will find as well is as you add documents to the system, they should appear like this in a line. So for example, documented learning plans is a yes. So we've got here term 1, term 2, term 3, and you can either remove those or add those as you see fit. Now, we haven't added in the system yet the function for schools to delete records of students that are ALN, but in phase 2 of our system, we will be adding a delete button. So if you put a child in the ALN system, they're receiving interventions, and then a parent objects to them being in the ALN system, or actually they've completed all of their interventions and are no longer requiring ALN support, then you can remove that record from the system. Now, at the moment, you can't do that, but we want to give schools the functionality to be able to do that. Okay. And then, as I say, make sure where it's an asterisk and it's asking for it, that you attach all of the information that we've asked for. And then you will see a preview of all of the things that you've attached in the system, and then any details that are associated with that. One thing I will stress to you is when you hit save at the bottom of the record, make sure that the system tells you the student details have been updated successfully. We have had times where schools have updated records and then not hit save and then come out of that screen. The screen has expired and then they've had to start again. Okay. And then just finally, make sure that the data you put is correct. The data is confidential, and it's confidential between the school and ADEK. We will not share that information or data with anybody else. And then also, as part of ADEK policies, lots of schools have asked about data sharing agreements and do we need parents' permission? So I know this session is being recorded, so I will be quoted, but you are not required to have parents' permission to include ESIS information. It's part of the ADEK policy with schools and part of the licensing arrangements with schools that schools have to update the electronic student information system within ADEK. Now, obviously, I would, and you will, have conversations with parents about the information that you store on their child. And it may be that, as I say, some parents object to you including that information. My advice to you as schools is to get in writing from the parent that they do not wish for some information to be included in ESIS, because when you have a compliance visit, they will ask you if you've uploaded all of the information. Now, you may have a child on your SEN register in school that you are supporting that may not appear in ESIS. And if the compliance team have an ESIS list that's different to your school list, they will ask, why is it different? And you can say, well, Bill's parents did not give us permission to include the information. However, they were happy for school to continue with the support. So you are covering yourself for a compliance visit. And one thing I will say, anything at all in terms of questions, email us at the Students of Determination Office at adec.gov.ae, and we will do our best to respond. I will say the mainstream team is only a team of 3 people, but we do our best to respond to things as best as we can. And if you are a head of inclusion in an Abu Dhabi school, there is an ADEK Heads of Inclusion WhatsApp group. By all means, email the Students of Determination Office mailbox and we will add you to that group. Okay, and that's me finished.
Philip, that was so clear and concise, crystal clear, step by step, and exactly the kind of information that the heads have been asking us. So really, thank you so much for your support and your help in delivering that. Okay, we're going to move on to Miss Amy and have our next section of the session where Amy's going to run through what we need to do for the Dubai portals.
Catherine, could you share your screen, please? It's still not letting me do it. It's kicking me out every time I try to share it.
Is it, oh,
Did you manage to download it yet?
I did indeed, and I just hope that we will be able to do it properly because I'm terrified now that I'm going to be. Okay, a specific window.
Wonderful. So I'll be as quick as possible because essentially a lot of what Phil has already said regarding why we're collecting the information, it's very similar in terms of the processes. But for those who are based in Dubai, as we were talking about earlier, it would be the KHDA portal that you have to update on a regular basis. So the purpose of this is data collection from KHDA, and essentially it's for information sharing, it's for them to support us. So one of the key aspects in terms of monitoring is to ensure that whatever you put on there, make sure you're aligned with it for the compliance visits, just to make sure that there's no grey area in terms of the communication. So the first thing for those people who are asking the questions before, how do you gain access to this? Depending on the term that you use in your school, it would be your KHD officer, your liaison officer, or your registrar, or your principal would have access. And it would only be the head of inclusion who would update this portal. It wouldn't be inclusion teachers within your team. So I think I've made a short video. Hopefully it'll work. Technology is not on our side today. If you press play for me, Catherine, on that first video, if you go up, there's a little button. And essentially this is the login page. When you get to the first page, the first login, there we go.
Okay.
Perfect. If we play then from here, you will receive the login details from your registrar. And once you log in, you'll go to the initial navigation page. So if you just press play, Catherine, a little video will play.
I have pressed play and it's gone, it just keeps skipping to the next slide for me. So I'm sorry now, I hope it's not.
To be honest, I wouldn't worry because we can email it to everybody so they can guide their way through it. When you log into the navigation page, on the video, what it will show is on the left-hand side in the first column, second from the bottom, it would say new student information. So this is what you would then click on. From here, it will take you to the next page on the portal. I'm not sure if anyone can see it. Is it working? There we go.
Yeah.
Perfect. So this would be what would pop up. New services, sorry, on the left-hand side is the subsection that you need to go to get to the student of determination data. Then you will see a new page on the third column along where it says students of determination. Students of determination data is what we're talking about today. The students of determination report is where you'd retrieve that information from. The non-admission, which is the third section down, is where you would upload the non-admission forms for anyone who your school would not be accepting during the admissions process. That would be where it'd be loaded to. And then the individualized service agreement is what we also have to upload in terms of compliance visits to ensure that all of that information is shared and collated. But for the purpose of this webinar, we're just looking at the data collection, which is the first section. When you click on that, it will take you to a new page, which will be specific to your school. So Catherine, please switch to the next slide and you will see what pops up here. Okay, so on this section, this is essentially where we start to input all of that information and data. It would be relevant to your school as per the KHDA platform that all the information is logged into. So for Repton Al Barsha, we are a British curriculum school. So when we click on the curriculum section, it would only have the option for British. And then it would give you the option for which year group or grade you would be looking to update. So when we click play, I believe for this video, I've looked at year 4, just for the purpose of this session. And all of the students who will already be loaded onto this as per your registrar, the school will already have them on there. Different schools may have different names on there. However, our school uses them as contract class. We don't actually separate them into subclasses and subsection, but that may be personal to your school. The reason that we have all of our students in contract class per year group is that we have nearly 2,000 students. So for the registrar to then put them into different classes, it is a bit of a logistical job for them. Once you then get into the next part, you will see there's a bar at the top, and this is essentially where that information is the most specific for the students of determination. So if we click onto the next page, Catherine, I'm trying to go really quickly because I'm conscious of time, but when we click onto the next page, what you will see, that's the one, is there are certain subcategories. So we've got the first column is number. Now this is quite important because when you try to submit it, sometimes you might get a system error and it will say number 24. So always check the number that's popping up at the bottom because it's something as simple as that can trip you up with submitting the information. Then the first column is the student a student of determination. So by that, what it says is that student officially, as Phil was saying, is there a diagnostic report? Is there an educational psychology assessment? Is there a clinical or a medical report that would identify that student as an official student of determination? At this point, you would either click yes or no to basically start the process. Then the next section, which is the student detail, you would have the certain subcategories, which we'll talk through next, regarding the student's level of support. It would outline the provision in terms of the cost attached, how that cost is funded, as well as monitoring systems in schools such as IEPs. From here, you will have the fourth column, which is the additional categories. So if you have a student who has split identifications or may have some area of support and provision in place that's not officially identified, for example, they may have a clinical diagnosis of ADHD, however, they've got specific or they've got additional support in literacy, then you would outline that on this section. The fifth column along, formal diagnosis. This will ask you for any of the specific, is it a yes or a no? Do they have the official information and do you have it on file? This is important during compliance visits because you may be asked to share or present this information. So do make sure it aligns. If you've got a student who's new to school, who you've verbally been informed maybe neurodivergent and maybe has an identification of ASD, however, you don't have the documentation, make sure that aligns with whatever evidence you have so that you're not then in a situation where what you're saying isn't then backed up by your evidence alongside that. And then the final column is assess syndrome. So within that, we'll talk through what they are also. So then if you move on to the next category, which is probably the most important one, it will, and if we press play on that one, please, Catherine, it will talk you through what each subsection is asking for. And as I touched on briefly there, sometimes with the platform, it can be user-friendly on one day, and other days it might not play ball. So just to make sure, one of the things that people tend to fall down on is, because there's quite a lot of information in a short subcategory, in a short section, just make sure that you're not forgetting to put anything in, because it will not let you save it if you've not actually filled in all the data and information. So as we were saying there on the first category, is the student a student of determination, yes or no? Then you would move on to the next part. At the top of the screen, I've actually cut off the students' names for data protection, but it would say the student's full name as per their KHDA contract, which they're registered as. And here you can see on the first column, all of the different subcategories of need that are already listed on there. However, not all levels of support and identification are listed on there. So there is an option that says other, and when you click on other, you must put in what that area of need is. For example, I recently had a student a few years ago who had P132 condition, which has got no information on here. So all of everything on here just said other, but when they come in, they do ask for that. And then over the years, we've had other identifications that have been added to it, because it is trying to get the lay of the land in Dubai to understand what are the levels of need that our schools are working with. The video is just frozen for me, but when you do receive it, you can watch it. And essentially what it does say underneath this section is, does the student have individualized support in school? So if you click yes, it will give you an option. Does the student have a full-time learning support assistant or a part-time learning support assistant? Do they have a learning support assistant appointed by the parents, or is it by the school? Just so they can understand how schools are allocating provision also. Is the student enrolled in an alternative curriculum? Yes or no? For example, if you have alternative pathways such as ASDAN in school, then you'd obviously outline that, as well as put in the specific curriculum that they're on. Is the student enrolled in a vocational course? This is obviously, if we're looking at BTECs and what have you, for example, and you would obviously list that there too. Does the student use assistive devices and technology? If it was an AAC, yes, for example, you would put that in there too. So underneath each question, it's asking you for exactly what is in place for that child. So it builds up a picture of the provision in school, as well as the support that schools don't have. So they do use this to inform their practices and support us. Interestingly as well, there is a section that talks about exemptions, language exemptions. Is there an exemption from Arabic? Is there an exemption from modern foreign languages? Is it from one or from both or none? And then any services or provision in place, they ask for that information. Is there an LSA? Is the student attending therapeutic services? If it's, do they have specialist intervention? And then one of the key things that seems to be a topic of a conversation between heads of inclusion is how we interpret this. And people often have different concepts and different understanding of what that means. The biggest thing that helps all heads of inclusion is in the top right-hand corner throughout the whole portal page, there is a section that says guidance and definitions. This is what we refer to, and always keep it open while you're submitting and putting the information in, just to make sure that you're not going off on a tangent and understanding specialized intervention as something completely different to what KHDA are essentially trying to collect that data on. Now, all of this, it builds a picture of your school, and most importantly, as I keep touching on, the compliance visits, it is continuously monitored. Some schools before the end of the last academic year, they had updated it. However, the information hadn't been saved, or it hadn't gone through for whatever reason. It happens. Technology is not always our friend, as we learned today in this webinar. So one thing to always quality assure yourself is make sure you're contacting your key point of call in KHDA, whether it's Ghassan Naboud or if it's Ali Tahir, who's really helpful. They will actually send you an Excel spreadsheet, which shows you exactly what they can see from their side as well. So, for example, years ago, I updated the system, thought I'd completed it, done for that week, and then none of the information is actually saved. So it's always good after every time you update it, just to make sure that you've got that data, just to cross-reference that there's no gaps. And the reason it's important is when they when they come in for the compliance visits, they will say, how many students of determination do you have? And you will give them a number as per your register. This is essentially an external register. So from that side of it, imagine that if you say you've got 25 students of determination and they say actually you've got 15, there will be a conversation as to why it's not aligning and why that information hasn't been uploaded. So it's really, really important to make sure that your school policy is reflected in terms of your level system, what you define in your school as level 3, level 2, level 1, and then that's supported by the data that you're submitting into here as well. At the bottom, there's 2 buttons, one that says I confirm all students' determination in all grades is completed. When you click this, it will submit and lock the portal. So if you click it by accident, as I have done before, you will have to contact your representative at KHD and ask them to unlock it. But this is when you're completely confident that all of that data is submitted, it's accurate. That's the submission button. Then when you go to update it, you can ask them to unlock it at that time. Also, in terms of housekeeping, make sure you save it as you go as well. Loads of conversation and dialogue around, sometimes it crashes and it's a bit glitchy. So find the time that it's most user friendly for you. I tend to find that on an evening, it seems to be, I'm not sure if it's a technology issue, but for me, it tends to always be fine when I use it on Safari, on Safari, not Google. And when I am doing it on an evening and not during the school day. However, that's just something that I've found works for me. So that is essentially the KHDA portal, a whistle-stop tour. It aligns quite a lot with what's going on with the ADEK, the provision that Phil was talking through there. However, I do feel that ours is not as detailed in terms of the level of information that's required for the data collection. I know that was very fast. I'm sure there are questions, but I'm going to hand back over to Catherine now to see if anybody would like to ask any questions.
Okay. I think Fatima has her hand up. If anyone would like to ask a question, please feel free, pop it into the chat, or you can call out. Okay, but thank you so much, Amy. Again, that was crystal clear. It couldn't be clearer. Really useful overview of what we need to do. Because again, I wish we had something like this when I joined as a Senko, because we were literally feeling around in the dark, and it was next to impossible. So it's wonderful to have this kind of support and this kind of really clear guidance as to what we need to do. Okay, I'm sharing my screen just now, and I'm wondering, can you guys see?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, super duper. Okay, just to round up, guys, I'll do with just a few minutes, I'll run through some key actions that as a Senko we need to do in addition to what Philip and Amy have told us about the formal portals. So a real quick overview. Every inclusion team should do a quick policy review at the start of the year. If you're new to the department, that should be quite in depth. If you're returning to the department, then a quick review of inclusion, admissions, safeguarding, and G&T. A website review to ensure that your website is welcoming for families of people of determination. So if I'm a parent of a child who has individual needs, I would like to see some kids with different needs being celebrated on the website, so I know your school is welcoming. Ensure that the policies are available on the website and that it's crystal clear for parents what they need to do if they are applying with an SOD. Coordinate with your admissions team. So many of you were noting, I know Krista was saying we've so many new kids who are joining us. It's really valuable to have a crystal clear guidelines. Who's responsible for gathering all the documentation for SODs? Who's responsible for tracking and monitoring them? And what are the admissions procedures if you have an SOD? Are the inclusion team involved? And you should be involved from the very get-go. Make sure your SEND monitoring is in place from the start. And don't forget to start your trend analysis from day one. This will be really valuable when you come to the end of the term. trend analysis looking at, say, gender differences, Emirati, non-Emirati, looking at differences between your different subjects. So if you have all of your SEND students are doing fantastically in math, but not so well in English, why is that disparity at the end of the term? What analysis do you have to do to dig into that? Is there a gender gap in the school? Why might that be? They're really valuable trend analysis to do. And ensure that your SEND provision is robust, both push in and pull out sessions. And remember, the most important support a student can have is in the classroom. It's got to be quality first teaching. That is where the highest impact will be for your inclusion team. Okay, this year, Inclusion are really proud to be partnering with Zayed Higher Organization to celebrate inclusion practitioners like you. And we have curated a National Inclusive Practice Award. So we've been thinking about doing this for years at Inclusion. Harmeet and I, we wished this was in place when we were practicing. But this year we're starting with 2 categories. Inshallah, we'll move this out to more categories next year. But for the moment, we have a National Senko of the Year Award and a National Learning Support Assistant of the Year Award. So that's a Head of Inclusion or Senko or an LSA or Shadow Teacher. Applications are open. They're all free to apply. We'll be announcing our prizes this week, inshallah, and we hope they will be pretty impressive.
We're trying.
And please do share this. You can nominate yourself. Don't hesitate to nominate yourself or nominate others. The nomination form is pretty short. It's a couple of questions that are about 200 words each. You just fill in details about how you feel you might qualify for this award. All the shortlisted candidates then go to a panel of 6 expert judges, all available on the website for the awards, which you can find at inclusion.com, and there's an awards page there. And then the winners will be announced at the Accessibilities, where we will have our 5th Inclusion Summit. So if anyone's been to our Inclusion Summits already, we've had wonderful practitioners like Philip, we've had people from all the different regulators, from therapeutic providers, EdTech, loads of different people coming to share best practice. And that's always our goal. Again, that's all free to attend. And there's lunch, so it's good to go. So applied for the summit, please do apply for the summit. And next month, we will have our forum again on the first Monday. So please do watch out for our next summit. Again, thank you so much to our 2 presenters today, because this really was invaluable. And we had almost 200 people in the session. So thank you all for coming. And we hope you have a wonderful, wonderful new academic year.
And just to add on to that, we also do an LSA forum every Tuesday after Catherine does. So it's not tomorrow, it's the following Tuesday next week. I will be sharing this to all of you. I will be sharing it to your LSAs. Just pass it on to them, because that forum is a platform for LSAs to speak to LSAs. So it's something that has been very successful. Usually my Zoom only allows me to hold 100, and it's always up to 100 by the time I join. So I'm going to maybe be brave enough to come onto this Google Meet. Let me work my way through that. But if in case, whatever it is, I will share my link and the newsletter with all of the LSAs. Please share it with your LSAs as well.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great year ahead and have fun.
All right. Enjoy. Good luck.